Peter, you've written that when early astronauts to the moon looked back at the Earth, they often had a life-changing experience when they saw the planet as a fragile living organism in the darkness of space. So in your opinion, what is humanity's function in a world where borders are illusory from a broader perspective?
What I became fascinated by was, yes, what was humanity doing here? At the same time as the astronauts came back from the moon, other work was going on by people like James Lovelock, suggesting that the whole of the Earth was behaving like a single living system. All the biosystem, all the living creatures were somehow integrated into a single living system. And I became fascinated by what role do we play? And it seemed that what human beings are good at is exchanging information through language and through information technologies. We are exchanging information. So we are like the nerve cells of a global brain. And I became fascinated by the parallels between the way a human brain develops and the way the brain of the planet appears to be developing.
Mm-hmm. So we're linking together mind to mind through things like the internet?
Yes, yeah.
Mm-hmm. You've also looked at the photographs from far up in space of cities and have likened that to rogue cancer cells.
There's a lot of parallels between the way we human beings interact with the environment and the way cancer grows. I mean, cancers tend to be very selfish. They tend to grow fast, and they're also stupid, because if a cancer is successful, it's going to destroy its host. And if we're, the way we're going to destroy the planet and make it uninhabitable for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. You said that we are moving from biological evolution to mental evolution, that we're undergoing changes in thinking, perception, and attitudes, and that evolution is actually becoming internalized.
Yeah, I think that's what's happened now, is evolution. Our future evolution depends upon the evolution of our thinking, the evolution of our minds, the evolution of consciousness. We're not evolving so much physically now. We've taken off the pressures with physical evolution. And whether we survive or not is going to depend upon our thinking, our values, how we see things. So the survival of the fittest becomes the survival of those who are fittest mentally, spiritually.
Mm-hmm. And can you characterize that mental and spiritual fitness?
I would say that the fittest are going to be those who have stepped beyond the egocentric mind, the mind that is continually grasping and wanting to take things for itself, which leads to a lot of fear, a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. When you step out of that, you move into a much more compassionate state, a much more empathetic way of relating to others. Mm-hmm. And it's also, I think it's a much healthier state to be in, because when you're creating stress, I mean, we know so many illnesses come from stress, and when you step into that other mode of consciousness, you're just in a much more relaxed, easy, more comfortable state.
Mm-hmm. So the antidote to these ego issues is meditation. That's one antidote?
I would say meditation is one way of dealing with these issues. I think just self-inquiry, self-examination can help you a lot when you begin to see how your belief systems and attitudes affect you. That can be a great help. I think there's many different methods of approaching this. Meditation, though, tends to be something that is found in most spiritual traditions in one way or another, because I see meditation as just a quietening of the mind, just bringing the mind to a quiet state.
Mm-hmm. You've written that the one thing all people have in common is that they want to feel good. And yet culture tells them they need to have something in order to feel good. How has this cultural conditioning influenced us as stewards of a unified planet?
Yes, I think what we all want to feel comfortable. We want to feel okay. It's a natural biological thing. None of us want to suffer or be in pain. And if we're feeling good, it basically means our body's functioning well. If there's something wrong, then we feel some discomfort. That's completely natural to want to feel good, completely natural. The problem is that in our culture, we've become so good at manipulating the world, changing the world, getting things, that we've fallen into the belief, it's almost hypnotized into us, that the way to feel good is by getting something, having something, buying something, going somewhere, getting some experience. And the problem with this is that means we're always taking from the world in order to try and feel better. And sadly it doesn't work. We go and buy something, we feel better for a short while, but then it doesn't last until we go and get something else or do something else. So I think this is one of the reasons why we're abusing the planet so much.
Mm-hmm. And your remedy for this is?
To begin to see through it, to begin to see that it doesn't work. For example, we think that going and buying a new jacket or something makes you feel better. If you just look at it, particularly today with the internet, you realise it isn't actually the buying of it. When you press pay now on the internet, you haven't actually got the jacket, but that's when you feel better. And the reason you feel better is you're no longer feeling a lack, you're no longer feeling you're missing something. And I think our whole society is telling us we're missing something. And what we're missing is something inside, but all the marketing and advertising tells us we're missing something outside. And that's one of the reasons we just, we're caught in this consumer world, this materialistic world.
Right. You said that we are going into a time of upheaval, even catastrophe. And viewing this, people just don't want to change. And I think you've just come out and said that Western civilization is doomed.
Yes, I think we are doomed. I don't think there's any way out of the fact. I mean, all civilizations have collapsed sooner or later. And I don't think Western civilization is going to be any different. We like to think, because we're part of it, that, we're going to continue forever. But the way we're behaving, there's no way we're going to continue. I mean, our economic system is beginning to collapse. We're destroying the environment. I think climate change is going to ravage our civilization.
Mm-hmm.
And just the way our civilization works, which is all about taking from each other, abusing the world, abusing other people. It's a very egocentric civilization. Mm-hmm. We're so caught in our hubris that we are so powerful, and yet that very power is going to be our own destruction.
Mm-hmm. You've said that we're approaching a kind of singularity, a collective near-death experience. What did you mean by that?
The singularity is to do with accelerating change, and that as change goes faster and faster and faster, we're approaching a point where it effectively becomes infinite. It doesn't actually become infinite, but it effectively becomes infinitely fast. Mm-hmm. Which means, the changes we see now, what we're seeing now is change that happens in, 10 years today might have taken 100 years in the past. It may take 1 year in the future. Now, people like Kurzweil have talked about the singularity, but they're talking about a technological singularity when computers become as good as human beings. But I'm seeing a singularity beyond that, because the acceleration is still going to keep going on. Mm-hmm. And that's really, I see, the culmination of our evolution. It's what Teilhard de Chardin called the omega point. But he saw that as thousands of years in the future because he wasn't taking acceleration into account.
Mm-hmm. Where is this acceleration taking place?
The acceleration is really the acceleration in change, in novelty. You see it in terms of invention. Invention is what's bringing in new things into the world. We see it in our lives, the amount of things we have to take care of. I mean, 20 years ago, before we had email, if we wanted to communicate with someone, you wrote a letter, you put a stamp on it. A couple of days later, they got it, and you got the reply. Now, you write something, you press send, mm-hmm. and if you haven't got a reply in 10 minutes, you're probably on the phone to them saying, "Did you get my email?" Right. So that's just one example. Just having to, there's new phones. Apple releases a new iPhone, a new iPad every year, new computers, and we have to adjust them, we have to buy them. So it's just change is coming faster and faster and faster.
So this change is coming faster and faster and faster. Novelty is kind of duplicating itself, and you foresee a time in which change and novelty become infinite.
They approach infinity, yes.
Infinity?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
It means approaching infinity means they just get faster and faster in shorter and shorter times. What it actually means is I think the stress of change is going to become almost unbearable. And that stress is partly on ourselves, partly on social systems, partly on the environment. Mm-hmm. But it's going to, I mean, already we're feeling this, people are just complaining about stress and they're so busy doing everything the whole time. And I think the important thing we have to do is begin to take back time for ourselves, to reclaim time.
So is it possible to excuse yourself from the coming singularity?
No.
It's not?
No.
Can't I choose to get a cabin somewhere and to raise chickens and grow vegetables and just forget about the internet?
You can do that. You can certainly isolate yourself from that, but I think the effects in terms of the environment and things are going to affect everybody, wherever you are.
Mm-hmm. I think Chardin saw a time of the full descent of spirit into matter. Do you see something like that happening?
Yes, I would put it slightly differently. I would say it's the full awakening of spirit in matter. I don't think it's so much descent. I think consciousness is already there in everything, so it's not that consciousness needs to come into matter, but it's the full awakening of human beings, awakening to our own consciousness, our own being. So I think that time is coming, and that's sort of the spiritual awakening of humanity.
Mm-hmm. When do you see this as coming?
I see this is coming, again, faster and faster because everything is accelerating. It's really beginning to happen. We're seeing the first signs of it now. I would imagine in the next 10, 20, 30 years, we're going to really see that happening faster and faster. Mm-hmm. Just because more and more people are waking up to their own nature. More and more people are talking about it, more and more people are teaching it, more and more people are learning. And we're also realizing it's getting simpler and simpler and simpler.
Mm-hmm. I think the year 2035 has been cited because computers seem to double their power every 18 months, and at that rate, by the year 2035, we will have a computer that has the same complexity as the human brain, which will be able to then invent computers that are anything beyond that we can invent.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean for the singularity?
Well, that's what Kurzweil calls the technological singularity, when computers become as good or better than human beings. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about a different singularity, what I call an evolutionary singularity, which is beyond that. Because what that means is just the acceleration is going to get even faster. When you've got computers that are better than human beings at designing computers, then it just accelerates it even more. It gets faster and faster and faster. Mm-hmm. So I think that technological singularity is just another step in this ever-accelerating change.
Mm-hmm. What do you imagine would be the best for humanity, considering this approaching singularity?
I think the best is we really need to begin to ask ourselves what is important in life, what do we actually want ourselves, and also just to be taking much, much better care of the world we live in, take much better care of the environment. It's something which everybody's saying anyway, but I think it's going to become more and more critical as time goes on.
Earlier you said that we are united in our need for love, and we want to be loved just as we are. And the way to know the love of God is to have unconditional love in our own hearts.
Mm-hmm. I think love is a natural capacity of everybody. And by this I don't mean sort of romantic love, which is a natural capacity, but I mean that deep caring, that love is a feeling in the heart. I think we all know what love is, that feeling of, you can say it's warmth or fullness, a sense of connection, a sense of draw. And it's there in us all, but it's covered up. And it gets covered up by our wanting things, our judgments, the way we think, our busy minds. And I think it's only when we really begin to quieten the mind that we can begin to open up to that feeling of love that's there.
Mm-hmm. I've interviewed quite a few people who've had near-death experiences, and some of them have told me they've experienced a love that they've never known before. It's a kind of love that just does not exist in this life. And one woman told me she was told telepathically by the being of light, "Can you love others as you have been loved here?" And she said, "No, that's impossible. This love that I'm experiencing here is nothing I've ever experienced on earth. And the light told her, you can do better. I know you haven't really researched the near-death experience, but it seems to me that when people leave their bodies, it seems they tell me that the issues of the ego are left behind because they're no longer concerned with survival in a three-dimensional world.
Yes, yeah, I would agree with that.
So I would think that they've experienced something beyond a three-dimensional world that is really not communicable through a brain. So how can we bring the wisdom of enhanced consciousness into the world that we're living in?
I again think this is where meditation is really important. And as I said earlier, there's parallels between meditation and the near-death experience. See, I think what happens in both is that we step out of the ego thinking mind, and that's the mind that's looking after our survival, trying to be in control of things, trying to make things work. And when you're near death, then there's no point in doing that because you give up, you're about to die, so all that ego thinking isn't needed anymore. And what happens in meditation, in the same way, when the thinking mind stops, then you're no longer caught in that fear mode, and you sink into a state of peace. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, in the near-death experience, one of the qualities is of just a deep sense of peace and okayness, and I would say that's a quality that comes in meditation. It's like, it's all okay. And what is associated, the feeling of things being okay, is an opening of the heart. And that happens in meditation. There's that deep, unconditional love. It's not love for something, it's just love. One is love. You realise you are love. And I think that's also what happens in the near-death experience. And for many people, if you haven't experienced it in meditation, it's a completely new thing. Though I think people who have experienced in meditation may recognise it as well in the near-death experience. So I think by stepping out of the ego mind, quietening all those thoughts that come from survival-orientated concerns, by doing that in regular daily life, we can begin to get the benefit of the near-death experience without having to actually nearly die.
Do you believe in the continuation of consciousness after physical death?
I find that I have to rephrase the question probably. I mean, the short answer is yes, because I don't think consciousness comes out of the body in the first place. So it isn't that the individual consciousness survives death, but I believe consciousness as such survives death. There's a subtle difference there. So I don't believe that my individual sense of who I am survives death, because my individual sense of ego and who I am and my sense of identity is something that's been created in this body through my experience. And I think when this body and that set of experiences dies, then that sense of individual consciousness goes with it.
Are you saying that it is the witnessing consciousness that you know in meditation? Is that something that always is?
Yes. Yes, and that is the nature of consciousness, is to know. So the knowing is always there, but not the sense of individual identity which we create for ourselves.
Yeah, not our opinion of ourselves.
Not our opinion or our sense of me being here, Peter Russell. That's a very individual sense of consciousness, and I don't think that continues. So I think Peter Russell goes.
There's a section in your book about the gravity of love, in which parallels are drawn between the evolution of stars and the evolution of humanity. That gravity is the attraction of mass for itself. It's a force that pulls the universe back toward its original unity. What is that original unity?
Well, the original unity of the universe, one would have to go back, one would be talking about it these days as the Big Bang. Who knows whether the Big Bang was actually how it started? I think all that stuff is in question these days. But in that sense, the original unity was just a unity of energy. There was just an incredible amount of energy. It was just, then expanded as the Big Bang. So the original unity would be one of energy, pure energy.
Yeah. I think Buckminster Fuller said that love is metaphysical gravity. And you said that love is the attraction for life for itself, a desire for conscious union with another, and that the ultimate experience is reunion with our own source, the essence of consciousness. And the essence of consciousness is?
The essence of consciousness is knowing, it is being aware. I think that's the essence. It's what is always there the whole time, is being aware, whatever is going on, whether I'm feeling fearful or loving or whatever, is that sense of awareness that's always there. Mm-hmm. That's the essence of consciousness.
Peter, I'd like to talk about atheism, religion, and spirituality. Your view of God that you were given as a teenager was not acceptable to you because you had to have things reasonable. That had to be maybe confirmed by experiment or investigation. So what is your view of God now?
My view of God is, it's interesting, I don't actually like to use the word too much, but what I see as the essence of everything, the essence of the whole universe, the essence of me, which is what a lot of people mean by God. They say God is in everything, and I would say, yes, what is the essence that is in everything? And the essence that is always there. And it comes back to consciousness for me, that what is always there for me is the fact I am aware. What I'm aware of may change. When I'm asleep, I'm aware of dreams, which is different from when I'm awake. But there's always that awareness, and I think that awareness is always there in all beings, in everything. So for me, I would say, I would equate consciousness with God, or God with consciousness, with being aware. And so it isn't about God being a separate being. It's like the essence, we touch God when we touch our own essence, when we step behind the individual thinking mind full of all its concerns and fears and touch into our own pure being. That's when we begin to touch the divine in ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Some contemporary atheists who have written books on the subject cite biology and evolution as proof that a spiritual orientation to life is delusional. And yet, if you were to ask them what subject they'd like resolved, they'd probably cite the heart problem. So if the issue of consciousness is unresolved for them, perhaps it is disingenuous to call themselves atheists when they really haven't faced the problem squarely?
Right. Well, I think a lot of contemporary atheists are basically, they're discounting the God of religion, which I would as well, which I think is, something that comes from belief systems in the past of how we saw things, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago. So that's their atheism. They're discounting the God in the sky, the God who made things, the God who looks after us. And I would go along with them. So I'm an atheist in that sense. However, that's not what the mystics are talking about. That's not where religion began. I mean, if you look at what all the great mystics are talking about when they talk about God, they're talking about a deep inner identity with the essence of the cosmos. And that's an experience. And I think contemporary atheists they're not even thinking about that, as you say, they're just oblivious of that. But that, to me, when we begin to understand the nature of consciousness, we will begin to understand what spirituality has been on about all this time.
Mm-hmm. How has the practice of meditation brought you to maybe a different understanding of the teachings of Jesus?
Yes, I think it's opened me to a deeper understanding of them. We talked about love earlier. Jesus said, love is a critical thing. Love thy neighbour. Who is thy neighbour? Everybody. Have that universal, unconditional love. The way, I am the way. Well, I think it was Jesus who said that, but it's in Christianity. The way, I am the way, isn't about Jesus being the way, but it's discovering one's own nature. So I see a lot of the statements about I are not so much statements about Jesus, but just statements about the true self, the nature of the self. Mm-hmm. So I've been fascinated. I spent a lot of time going back and sort of re-looking at Christianity in the light of mystical understanding of consciousness.
Yeah. You write a lot about The metaphysics of light. I know it's a complicated subject, and you gave a brilliant talk on it, but it took you a while to make your point because the subject is so complex and requires kind of a step-by-step explanation. But do you have a brief explanation about how light can be equated with spirituality and your new interpretation of the word God?
Yes, I don't know how to do it. I'll try. I was fascinated when I was studying physics by relativity. That was my speciality in light. And what the theory of relativity says, Einstein's theory of relativity says, if you were to travel at the speed of light, time would stop. Space would contract to nothing. And mass would become infinite. And therefore we can't travel at the speed of light because we take infinite energy. However, light travels at the speed of light by definition, which means from light's point of view, there is no time, there is no space. Now, when you go deep in meditation, what you find is time and space also drop away. And one talks about the timeless moment, there's just that eternity, that you don't feel time is passing, you are in this, what's often called the timeless moment in mystical teachings. And there's this sense of spaciousness, it's not you're just here in a body, there's this sense of just, you are in the space of consciousness and there's no boundaries there. And I was fascinated by these parallels. And so it seemed, and also this experience of light, very often in deep meditation, there's this sense of light, like your mind is full of light, in a very, like this very gentle feeling of being bathed in light. And so I began to think maybe the deeper parallels here, we use the word light, not just for physical light, but we talk about the inner light, the light of consciousness. You go unconscious, you say the lights went out, I had a flash of insight, enlightenment. We use the word light for the mind a lot. So I began to see that these close parallels were suggesting that whatever the absolute is, we call the absolute God, the first manifestation of the absolute in the physical realm is what we call light, electromagnetic energy, which in some senses is primary, it's more fundamental than matter. And in the mind, the very first manifestation of consciousness is that sort of inner light beyond space and time. And so you could say that the manifestation of the absolute, the first level, is light. And again, spiritual teachings say in the beginning there was light, and that many teachings talk about light being fundamental.
Are you saying that what can happen in meditation is somehow analogous with the teachings of physics about light?
It's analogous that if you travel at the speed of light, then you become timeless. And in the same way, in meditation, when you step beyond your sort of attachment to the material world, you enter into this timeless realm. Mm-hmm. So there's parallels there, and I was beginning to feel that these parallels suggest some deeper relationship. I don't want to say it proves anything, it just became fascinating for me. There's something else going on here which may even be beyond the power of the human mind to actually fully grasp.